Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's episode. I'm Charles, your host, and with me is Evan Reese, who is my co-host today. And our guest is Daniel Friker, who is a global leader in talent management and HR technology, with more than 25 years of experience helping organizations transform how they attract, engage, and retain top talent. As an executive and an advisor to Fortune 500 companies and innovative startups, Daniel specializes in leveraging AI-driven staffing solutions and digital tools to optimize workforce performance and drive business growth. He is currently serving on the Career Advisory Board for the College of Science and Engineering at the University of Minnesota, where he provides strategic guidance on the future of work and emerging technology trends. Now, Daniel is a sought-after podcast guest and speaker, and now he's a guest on our show. I'm so glad to have you here. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So today we're going to be talking about when AI breaks the system, why faster isn't always smarter. We're going to be looking at how AI is flooding job markets and stressing out recruiters. So this is going to be more of a look at the HR side of AI. Is that right?
Yes.
All right.
Absolutely. I mean, we're definitely going to get into a little bit of what some of the research is starting to show as more and more companies and staffing companies and hiring managers are using these tools and platforms. And what should show efficiency in terms of being able to attract and retain top talent, at least for now, there's several data points that look at this, is actually showing entropy, is actually showing things becoming less efficient. And there's definitely some reasons why, and I think some ways to potentially correct those problems.
Now, you're using AI currently with your business, is that right?
Yes. In fact, maybe that's right there where part of the conversation needs to have, because you have so many different types of AI tools that, number one, are existing. So just about every major applicant tracking system, vendor management system, HRIS system that you can think of, right, has today some type of AI component in it. And part of that is just sales driven. Like it is something that you're seeing within the board of directors. The C-suite are basically saying, how can we adopt these new technologies to run our business more efficiently? Yet, I think strategically, you still have some misunderstanding in terms of what AI can and cannot do. But it essentially is being thrust upon people, both within the technical group, so your IT departments that are actually implementing them, and then the functional groups, not really kind of overlapping the Venn diagram to figure out what type of business value some of these tools can do. And even if these tools have some really cool whiz bangs, are you changing your processes or adapting your processes to really allow it to create peak efficiency in your company?
So
Evan,
let me let me dig a little deeper there for a second, because I'm hearing an extreme parallel to what I'm seeing on the marketing side also. So from a technology standpoint, right? Like thinking as a technologist, are you seeing AI emerge in these HRIS solutions as almost like a single AI enabled point solution at that piece of the technology layer? Or are you seeing the department basically say, hey, IT team, go ahead and make sure that we're plugged into OpenAI and join one of these foundational models, and let's just leverage that and build it ourselves? Kind of, how are you seeing how it's being deployed across like the HR technology space?
I guess the best analogy I can think of is throwing a bunch of Legos in a room and people trying to figure out what to make of them.
What they want and how to build it, yeah.
Yeah, because, I mean, if you're looking, let's just start with the basics. If you're going to apply for a job, what do? You write a resume, or you update your LinkedIn profile. Right now, and by the way, a lot of the data sources that I'm using are actually coming from places like Glassdoor, LinkedIn, sometimes the Bureau of Labor Statistics. There's a great company called Talent Edge AI that is doing a really interesting thing as it's looking at kind of predictive analyses in terms of supply demand curves and job skills, that sort of thing. But according to LinkedIn, only about 40 to 50% of people are even using AI to build their resume. And if I were to ask anyone on this podcast or listen to this podcast to build a resume today from scratch, It's tough.
It is.
So,
Yeah.
so even just there, what you're now also seeing though on the customer side, or I would say the hiring manager side, and this is a good thing because for decades, you always had this kind of friction between talent acquisition, HR, and the
Mm-hmm.
hiring managers. Didn't matter if
Yep.
it was for accounting, finance, or IT, engineering, whatever. There was always this friction because you would have these generic job descriptions, and the HR team wasn't always capturing the really critical knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
skills, and abilities that would set a person apart.
Yep.
The great thing with a lot of spin the wheel, pick one, doesn't matter, Gemini, Copilot, whatever, you can use some of these more basic tools to actually say, write me a good job description for an oil and gas company with it.
Yeah.
And you'll get a pretty darn good, at least base model resume.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So just to kind of tie the two things together, you've got job descriptions which are getting a lot more accurate and better.
Mm-hmm.
You have job applicants that less than half are using an AI tool to kind of match their knowledge, skills, and abilities to those particular positions.
And honestly, I think that there's like an application, like intelligence gap there. A lot of them, I don't think, realize that they need to be training their resume in a way with certain like phrases that make discoverability better for them as an applicant. I mean, I've talked to some people and they just don't understand. And I've sat here and I've coached them like, hey, no. You need to update your LinkedIn. You need to actually use that little eyebrow bar there where you can put your top 3, things that matter about you. You need to actually have skills on it because all that gets fed into our profiles too. We've gone as far to try and help actually enrich it with applicants by asking them questions and then using those kind of quick 3 qualifier questions to further enhance what their answers are, right? Because they may mention skills there that aren't necessarily mentioned at all on their entire job history, right?
Right.
So, I mean, I do like the fact that you can kind of still prime the AI to be a little bit enabled better in some cases for applicants, but no, keep going with your thought there on what you were saying.
Yeah. So again, half the population is using AI to custom config their knowledge, skills, and abilities to the job. Half aren't. So right there, you now have a gap in terms of what your best applicants maybe just aren't using AI correctly.
Aren't using AI. Yeah.
Right. Number 2, and honestly, again, spin the wheel in terms of some of these applicant tracking systems. Your bullhorns, your work days, and rattle off a number of them. But even the best ones, if heaven forbid, you do it right, you build your resume, you've got it pegged to the job, you're the greatest fit. Even importing that resume into these tools, now a lot of them will let you kind of take a look at how it's been able to pull it either from a PDF or Word or whatever.
Yep.
But there's still significant gaps. And we're talking about somewhere between 20 and 30%. And I've had conversations with hiring managers going, you're telling me this is a good applicant, but look at their resume. It's all formatted incorrectly, not knowing that sometimes it's more of a technical problem than the actual person's CV itself.
Yep.
Right.
But,
or I've seen one where if it's a person is in a single role within the company and they switch between roles within that company, it will flag our system and make it look like they had quick 6-month jumps between different jobs. And like, that's a red flag for me. So I've got that listed over here. It's like, we need to monitor this. It's a red flag. If somebody jumps between a lot of different jobs, usually like we tend to look for people that have had at least like 2 to 3 years so they can see the fruits of their labor in year 1, what they deployed, and then what the long-term impact was, right? Like that's truly like what we look for in a good candidate. But you miss that sometimes on these AI pieces because it didn't recognize the continuity between the same job. It's just your title changed. This guy got promoted under the same name, but got assigned to different contracts within the same company. So it looked like 4 or 5 different just jumps, but he was actually just getting bigger and better deals and bigger and better clients to work with.
Correct. And what we've also have seen, and again, this is kind of some of those nuances with AI.
Yeah.
Sometimes AI doesn't always recognize. So, like, for example, I worked for a Manpower Group for 20 years, right? There's different divisions, right? So I worked for the Experience division. I worked for the corporate side. And the AI system will look at that saying, oh, you work for, you job hop every 2 to 3 years. And it's the same parent company.
Same parent company, yeah, but it looks
So you get, because it's funny when I actually use myself in some of these like guinea pig tests
Mm-hmm.
where I'm like, wait a minute. But again, this also gets back to some core fundamentals. I mean, you could even call it DevOps in some regards.
Yeah.
If you implement an AI tool, I would challenge you to think of any AI tool that you can kerplunk right now into any organization and go hands off. It's more like you plunk it in, and then you need to kind of dial it
You
in
do have
based
to.
on the feedback of the functional team leads and everything else.
Yeah.
Because in that exact example, maybe the pre-calibrations would ding you on job hopping when you're like, no, that's not really. It's not really
Yeah,
what's going
and
on.
I mean, when it comes also down to like job titles, I mean, it's the biggest problem too with job titles because like you may have at
Yeah.
Microsoft someone's called like a program manager, right? But they actually manage people over a whole group, or they may be a group manager, right? But then you could have directors that don't manage anybody, but they direct an entire function or an entire set of accounts, but they're not people managers. So there's these inconsistencies here. I mean, right now, I think we're hiring for a digital marketing role, and we've had to try to go after various phrasing of it because AI can't pick it up. Like some people call themselves programmatic media buyers, completely accurate version of digital marketing. Some people call themselves digital marketing, channel marketing, right? Completely accurate. But there's so many just subtle breakdowns that the models don't pick up and realize this is the same role, and we need to look at all of these applicants. Instead, we just get your pool's only like maybe 23 people big, and the total prospecting pool is like that's not realistic. It's definitely bigger than that. You're just not getting it.
There isn't really a standard for all of these different job titles, right? I mean, that's how you end up with job titles that have like
a staffing firm exists. I mean, that's why. Yeah, Daniel, you're employed today, right?
Well,
that's true.
I'll do you one better, right? So, if you look at Silicon Valley firms. Yep. And I've had the pleasure of working with a number of them, from Cisco to Microsoft to, not to name drop, but you get the idea. You're looking at resumes, you're looking at CVs as essentially antiquated, right? We have been on a journey just very quietly to become a skills-based way of finding talent, right? So again, we just talked about one of the core problems in terms of defining a job title. What AI has the potential of doing, along with combining some of these other legacy technologies, blockchain, that sort of thing, to be able to get a better quantifiable number to your skills, right? So if you're talking about on the technical side, yes, Cisco, if you get like your CCNA or CCDA, like there's some like networking certifications that can help to quantify that how to do a particular task, right? Where I have seen AI in some cool experimentation is to say, okay, we need this person to be a really good public speaker, but they didn't exactly write in their resume like public speaker.
Public speaking, yep.
But you can tweak it in such a way to say, oh, this person's doing podcasts or publishing articles, they're in seminars.
And feed it that way, yeah.
And be able to give them essentially a meta-analysis score, right? And the way big tech companies work, and it's always hilarious because it always happens during the summer where like they had these layoffs and they hire people on because they are basically sunsetting some of the products that they have only to kind of start with new products. So they literally let these folks kind of go into the wind, and then they're behind the scenes, they're pulling together the next generation teams to go on whatever type of initiatives. But they're doing it based on skills as opposed to just your resume. And if I had to kind of use my crystal brain and look into the future, I think we're going to see more and more of this. And that has the ability for companies that are adopting and adapting some of these AI, HR, talent acquisition tools to be able to get their hands on talent quicker and more efficiently than those that are using traditional methods.
I just wanted to bring something up because we were talking about efficiency here, but there's a difference between efficiency and excess.
Yes.
Right? Because I can now use AI to tweak my resume, to build my resume, and I can use AI to help me apply for a job. So I'm going to apply for 10,000 jobs, just like everybody else. So as a business, you are now flooded with 10,000 resumes, where 5 years ago you would have gotten 20 or 30. Now you're getting hit with thousands. So now you start relying on AI to help filter that, right?
Correct.
And
so
therein lies a new problem, because you're trusting AI that's going to filter out all of these resumes and present to you just the top 10, top 20, or whatever it is that you're looking for. And those are the ones that you as a human will go through. And we've seen how that has not worked out well in the past, right? ZipRecruiter had their legendary fail not too long. That's just a year and a half ago, I think, that there are issues where, let's see, their algorithm found two factors to be the most indicative of job performance. If your name was Jared and you played high school lacrosse, that would bring you to the top of the list. But there were even Amazon had issues with theirs, right? Amazon had their experimental hiring tool. It would sift through resumes, and it would dock you points and push you down the list if you had the word women or women's anywhere in your resume.
Was that just because the machine learning learned that at some point, and then it just found that?
It's because it's a system that's designed to learn from pattern recognition, right? This is a pattern that we had.
Resume that someone just fed data to and said, no, this isn't good, this isn't good, this isn't good. Maybe they all had a common theme, or maybe they all studied women's rights or something else. I mean, I don't know, right? But something fed it and taught it that, and then it went down from there. That's interesting.
Well, you start learning a hiring process from companies that may have had sexist, racist, whatever it is. It's still in the system, right?
So how do you solve that, though? Right? I mean, like, we want to be as ethical and unbiased as possible in our hiring practices. I mean, that should be the primary goal of this, right? And we have to trust to some extent that Silicon Valley and the creators of these foundational models are deploying some level of constraints that help it still stay within that realm of ethical practice, right? So does the burden then fall on the hiring department for providing better questions, right, to ask, to try to weed out some of the people that just don't even want to answer more questions, right? Or does it fall on the end applicant to actually sit down and say, I'm actually going to give you a portfolio of stuff. Here's a bunch of project summaries I've done. Feed everything into the AI algorithm. Go ahead. I wanted to know all of it, right? Here's my portfolio. Here's summaries of everything I was involved in the last 3 years. You let it tell you or not if I'd be a good fit, right? I mean, like, whose responsibility is it?
So the good news is some of this has already been figured out.
Okay, good.
So
at least someone's thinking about the hard problems.
Yeah. So, which seems like a long time ago, but when I got my master's in HR analytics, there actually was a study. It was a joint study by the University of Michigan, University of Iowa, also called the Hunter Schmidt study. And so it's been going on for 60 plus years. And it really came down to asking one simple question, which is, again, how do you hire the best talent? Right.
Okay.
And so, but this was all around kind of the data science approach, which is if you were, as I'm talking here, I want to say F of X, but if you're looking at kind of the key variables, it would be like, okay, do they score well in the cognitive ability? Do they have, and you can kind of create these factors. And there's been a lot of follow-up studies behind the Hunter Schmidt study to kind of further validate into different areas and functions, right? So that study continues to go on. Where you talk about some of these weird problems that are showing up within the algorithm, I mean, if you look at, when Google started the Google Mind or Google Brain initiative, so that was 2016, that was a joint effort between a gentleman named Andrew Neg, who was a PhD at Stanford, and several executives within Google. And then this was about 2 years later, you had OpenAI. And even they started noticing problems literally in kind of the first, second, third generation. So like we're talking about things like, man is to software developer as woman is to homemaker. And if you're looking at the code behind the scenes, all you can see is the parabolas being formed to go up to 3 over, and this is what it was.
Yeah.
So that leads. So the people that kind of actually recognize this is an issue is actually Europeans. So EU passed the AI law, number one, to not just talk about humans must be involved in the hiring process, right? Because you technically could just fully automate your hiring. But number two, it requires you to actually document how you're using AI, but it's also forcing companies to kind of evaluate what are the outcomes of your process.
Yeah.
Because if you have bias in your hiring practices, which, by the way, could be intentional, could be unintentional.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
all AI is going to do is just throw gasoline on that fire, and it will take it and increase it exponentially. And so you might not even know that a particular manager, department, whatever, is going through unfair practices until the AI is basically taking it and just amplifying that to an 11.
Yeah.
And so, and I won't even get into the data science piece, which is, what does your data look like? Is it structured? Is it unstructured? And the cool thing with the AI is it will work with both, but your R values, your your actual correlations are going to be a lot weaker if you don't have a good structured data set.
Yep. Well, and your data has to be right though, and it's like, and you have to do it from an experimental design perspective, right? I mean, like those R values, those correlations, you can only get to that if you sit down and you define the attributes ahead of time, right? I mean, if I went through every single hire and I said, all right, I am actually going to include a keyword list of a very explicit list of skills that we're going to hire for, and I'm going to go ahead and yes, ask people for portfolios. Then we're going to go back and we're going to look at out of all these hiring, which ones that we got portfolios from and actually included these, and then what was the end result, right? Did we hire somebody that included that stuff, or did we hire and select for something else? But I mean, to be honest, I mean, I don't think most HR departments have that level of experimental design, right? They don't usually come at it from a scientific angle. They come at it from a people and culture angle most of the time.
Correct. And I think you're actually bang on, but I think there's actually a good example or good examples of actually how to do it better. So if, a lot of the time when you're looking at hiring and like who's in your department today, it's a lagging indicator. It's like those are the people that are in the room behind you and everything else. And I swear this is not a commercial for Talent Edge AI. I'm just using them because they're top of mind.
Yeah.
But there are tools that you can get today. So if you're in marketing, right, and you have an initiative today, it's like, okay, you can use AI to build your job description today, which is kind of present and past tense.
Correct. Yep.
But you now have tools that can help you say, what are the skills that you're going to need in the next 6 months and 12 months? And should that be incorporated in your job search? And that also, so that's kind of some of the really new cool stuff that's starting to come out. But to your point, and I feel like we've already brought this up, if your talent acquisition team isn't being that kind of forward looking to kind of go into this to say, we have to reimagine what this looks like. And we need the feedback from the hiring manager community, and we need feedback from the technical community to figure out if it's even possible. But if you do it right, you can really create some cool stuff. And I've seen some cool stuff, but it's still in that kind of experimental phase.
We spoke a while back, and you brought something up that I kind of wanted to talk about or just touch on real quick. And it's not necessarily HR related, but I thought that it's definitely worth talking about on the show. So we understand that AI is completely changing the way that a lot of these different industries operate. And there are some industries that you would think, well, AI is not going to do anything for them, right? They're safe from this technology, or they're not really going to be affected as much. And we had brought up farming. Farming was something that we like, all right, AI is not really going to affect farming in some way. And you quickly corrected me with something that John Deere is doing.
This is a little near and dear to my heart. So my parents actually live in a place called Galena, Illinois, which is just across the Mississippi River from Dubuque, Iowa, which is the headquarters of John Deere, right? And if you grew up in the Midwest, you can't get around it. Like, agribusiness is kind of the heart and soul of the Midwest, let's be honest. And the more I started learning about John Deere, the more they are now calling themselves a AI technology agribusiness.
Really?
Right? But what they're doing is, this journey has been something that's been going on for almost 3 decades.
Okay.
Right? And it started off with kind of some simple data science around like, okay, if you're a farmer and you've got 3, 5, 10, 15,000 square acres, what are the best crops that you should plant that will maximize your yield based on where you are in the country, maximize whatever kind of commodity prices.
Yeah.
So you start having more scientific method in there.
Yeah.
Right? Well, John Deere kind of saw that as the next generation to go, okay, we think about self-driving cars. Well, now you have self-driving combines. Right? And what most people don't realize, that one of the most expensive things when you farm is something called overlap, right? So if you're plowing a field, just think a square, you're going back and forth, back and forth.
Yep.
How much do you overlap with the previous, the previous row?
Yeah.
And that could be 5 to 10%. Well, 5 to 10% times this, surface area for your farm is.
That up.
You now have self-driving John Deeres that are accurate within 6 inches.
Wow.
So if you're going from a 10% overlap to a 1% overlap, that means that if you're putting down fertilizer, you're cutting your fertilizer bill in half. We're talking about like you paid $400,000, now it's $150,000.
Yeah.
Right? They incorporated facial recognition software and their machinery that basically looks for weeds. So if it sees a weed, then it deploys your herbicides.
Yep.
So now you're talking about, instead of spending $500,000 on herbicides, now it's $100,000. And oh, by the way, you're using less of it. So you think about the runoff. And this last year at CES, they actually introduced essentially retrofits for older John Deere models. Well, overnight, all your other kind of major manufacturers, like your AGCOs and everything else, are going, they don't have this type of technology.
Yeah.
Or at least certainly not, and they're playing catch up to this technology. Yeah. So, you know, now if you think about what that means from, well, we talked a second ago about skills, right? And I don't know how much you guys know about farming, but like your tractor brakes, your combine brakes, is it electrical, hydraulic,
Yep.
You get really good at kind of fixing it on the fly. Well, what happens when the lens cracks on your CNC
AI
unit, and you have to have an IT guy to kind of come out and figure out. But if you're doing it right, you're doing it well, you're addressing worker shortages in rural America. You're using a lot less in terms of fertilizers. You're using advanced analytics to even figure out like how you grow your fields, so you don't even have to use as much fertilizer, because if you plant different things, it is really disrupting in a big way. In fact, that's also where I'm seeing a lot of private equity money going. Is it's not just AI and what it means in the digital world. It's practical applications of AI in the real world, which is actually getting some of the most money. And I think John Deere is, maybe because they're Midwest, they're not getting up there as much as like getting a lot of buzz as much as maybe like a Walmart, how they're using the AI
or something.
For,
Well, and we see a lot of these vertical specific use cases. I mean, I like that ag use case because it is very specifically ag, right? I mean, it's just when we want to enable small farmers to do more agriculture in the most efficient way possible. How does that help John Deere? Well, they use their tractor more, they get more space, they plow more land, whatever, right? More tractor hours means, more upkeep, more John Deere purchases, et cetera. And we enabled it and helped champion that. Like, I love that. I mean, on the pharma side, I see this fascination happening with AI and molecular models, like in a very similar way, right? Is that like we have all of these different ways to treat cancer, right? It's documented. We have all of these different tumors in cold storage, and we have seen different types of cells. Like what a lot of people don't know is, breast cancer isn't just one form of breast cancer, right? Colon cancer isn't one form of colon cancer. There's 4,000, 5,000 different pathways and ways that these like cancer molecules kind of show up, right? These cancer cells show up. But you can't treat 4,000 different pathways with X amount of pharmaceutical, molecules. You have to do it at scale somehow. So there's this historical kind of database of all of these tumor cells that have been collected over the years that nobody's doing anything with. They're all in deep cold freeze. And the pharma industry is sitting here saying, well, let's put all the molecules we have in a database, have them rapid prototype new versions of themselves, and see if we can attack any one of these crazy versions of breast cancer and see what happens. So we're entering this era, too, where we're about to see like variation explode at scale and potential solutioning explode at scale. And I think about like, again, back to your ag example with John Deere, there are probably 1,000 different ways that you could slice a farm plot to figure out the best yielding crops. There is no way that farmer will be able to do that themselves. So we're just entering this era now. I think it was Reid Hoffman? He coined it as super agency, right? He's saying that we are entering the era where we're going to take our own AI agents and they're going to enable us. And this is the era of super agency for individuals.
You're bringing up kind of that next bastion. In fact, so we just had our board meeting at the University of Minnesota within the Grant Advisory Board. My favorite question to ask, because I am the dumbest man in the room when I walk in there.
At least you own it, right? I do the same thing.
It's not even close. It's not even close. But it's my favorite question to ask, which is, what is some of the coolest things that the University of Minnesota invented within the College of Science and Engineering?
Yeah.
And Dr. Shaw will hand it, apropos to nothing, was like, now, he's an astrophysicist. In fact, he's recently just stepped down as the head of the physics department.
Yeah.
And he's like, the work we're doing with neuroscience.
And
I'm like, wait, astrophysics, you're supposed to be looking at with the James Webb, telescope.
Yeah.
He's like, you don't understand. when you look at a disease like Parkinson's, he's like, biophysics is actually one of the fastest growing areas, because he's like, you take Parkinson's and it's all about disrupting how electrical impulses are in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, we've been studying wavelengths, for
Yeah,
decades and have all the
forever,
research.
right? Yeah.
And we're able to apply these models to get wavelengths to basically think of like the Voyager. The Voyager is
Yep.
like outside of our solar system, so how do
Yep.
you communicate it with and everything else?
Mm-hmm.
He's like, if you flip it around to the micro, we can now develop devices that essentially allow those electrical impulses to work again.
Yeah.
And he's like, so we're now taking physics that from big to small, and it's having a really good practical application to cure things like Parkinson's. And
that's so exciting.
AI has that ability of saying, to your earlier comment about, we have this research here, combine it with this research, and then coming up with entirely new potential solutions and products that human beings would have never been able to do at scale.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. I mean, I'm really excited to see, what this future of super agency does. I mean, like, I think you guys probably saw in the news, Qatar or Qatar, I mean, depending on how you pronounce it, right? They just gave their entire country AI, right, as part of the Open AI for Countries initiative. That is fascinating to me, because in this world, on at least the Silicon Valley side, everyone's trying to figure out, how do I monetize it? Right. Yeah. If I add it as a point solution into my HR, program, will they pay for it, or will the IT department pay for it, or will they literally just say, no, I'm just going to use my own OpenAI model. I'll merge it into, your end technology. So everyone's trying to figure out how to monetize it. And then over here, you have an entire country that says, actually, I just want to see what happens to the value of innovation in our country. So we're just going to give it to everybody for free, because we think that burdens on us. That is fascinating to me. I mean, that is like a landmark stake in the ground that basically says, hey, rest of the world, are you going to go ahead and enable your best innovators and try to inspire a generation of innovation? Or is it just going to be us over here?
Well,
I love that.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, because I will tell you, if there's one area of HR analytics that makes me feel uncomfortable a little bit is some of the stuff that is coming out of China. So you think about, some of the concepts we talked about earlier, right? Finding the right workers, finding the right talent. Well, what happens when you give that talent a bunch of wearable tech, right? And then now you're able to kind of track, like, what's their performance over the course of an entire day, right? And then you're like, okay, who are the best workers to work in my factory based on this, biometric data that's coming out, right? Now, the implications of that decision is, who's typically going to work, really hard or really well? Well, I mean, are you discriminated against age? You're discriminated against gender, because now you're like, this is the ideal person. But
because you're looking for work ethic, right? And work ethic definitely has different.
Right, but that's
yeah. I mean, energy has different ebbs and flows through life, work ethic, etc. I mean, again, and you could, especially with creatives, at least, right? Creatives, we have to be very mindful. Myself being one, and then those on our team. We have a hybrid work policy, right? And we like the fact that we have people that can come together 2 days a week and meet in person. But I know for a fact they need their time to go back home and let their mind just do what it does to make the creative process flow and flower for them. And if they're sitting on the couch, and I don't even know what they're wearing for the day, but they're designing things and it's new and it looks good, it's like, I don't really care what you're wearing. I don't care if you're in the nude all day or if you're sitting there and, you're doing it at the pool. Like, I really don't, right? It's just a matter of, did the work get done? Did the creativity change and move forward a little bit? And innovation happens in different ways. So, I mean, if you're starting to select it with that factory mindset, kind of like it was in, the Industrial Revolution era, you're not going to get the workers that you want, right? I mean, we saw people during the Industrial Revolution, it boomed, and what happened? They just shifted to different market segments. It wasn't just this overnight kind of firing of jobs. It was a full market rotation, and not everybody rotated into industry, into factories, because they weren't built for it, right? They rotated into other areas, or they moved back out to the countryside, right? To just find new methods and pathways. And I almost do think we are going to see that with AI to some extent, is while some jobs start selecting for certain things, some people I know for a fact aren't adopting it, right? And I see that, and it's just like, we feel like it is so omniscient right now and everyone is using it, but it's not, right? Some people are still just choosing to not be a part of this boom.
And Daniel, I have to assume that you, especially being an AR, you see that tremendously, right? People just are not adopting and not adapting to the changing environments, and they're getting left behind.
So yes, and I would actually argue it's actually getting worse every day.
You think
Right.
so?
Oh yeah. Well, it's because number one, you're seeing the speed of change is nothing that we've seen before.
It's not. It's incredible. I mean, it's
So-
hard to keep up with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, so McKinsey actually published a report last year, and they've been kind of tweaking this report, but basically what they're saying is 75% of jobs will be directly impacted by AI, right?
Wow.
And if you look at some of the things that happened within our lifetime, like the dot-com boom, you know, there were definitely certain areas of the economy that weren't really touched. But now what you're saying is everything from creative and arts and management, which we kind of talked about, to office support, everything in the middle, 75%. If you're using the e-commerce model, right?
Mhm.
And when I say the e-commerce model, in the 1990s, high-speed internet comes.
Yep.
Companies started adopting websites. Then they realized they can sell things 24/7. You get to 2017, more companies went out of business from a retailing perspective in 2017 than any point in U.S. history. Because with that bell curve showed you time and time again, those early adopters took that, had a competitive advantage. They were selling things at night, making more
Yep.
money. Then it became the gold standard. So the companies that didn't adopt and adapt were out of business by 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And so what McKinsey's basically saying is we're seeing that same cycle, so the same algorithm, but instead of having 20 years, you have 5 years. And so what they're saying is by 2030, if you haven't fully integrated AI into your business functions and help you with differentiation, you're probably going to be out of business by 2030.
Wow.
So it's the same model, just
That's a hard pill. That is a hard pill.
That's
Yeah.
a hard pill to swallow, but it's
Well,
very true.
I'll use an example. So you talk about creatives and arts management.
Mm-hmm.
I guess what came to mind are photographers. So if you're talking about like North Face and we're going to do a photo shoot and we're going to have skiers and everything else.
Yeah.
I was a skier. I still am. Now if North Face is like, yeah, I want this jacket, but I want it in red and I want it here, you don't need to call back the photographers.
No, you can update it up quickly.
don't.
Yeah.
Right. MarTech essentially has kind of replaced that. That's just one example. And I think you can, and again, it can be really good. So if you're a hospital, so like my grad school study was all about like, how do you effectively staff a hospital, which is hard without going bankrupt.
Hard.
Well, because like you overstaff it, you go out of business, you understaff it,
Yeah.
and people die. So it's
Yeah.
like, but you have like something like radiologists, which is, there are companies today that basically radiologists sit at home and, especially for rural America where they can't afford to have a full-time radiologist, really nice to have the capabilities of one that can work from home.
Yeah.
So it has the ability to kind of really help the economy writ large. But, to some people that are impacted very quickly, like the aforementioned photographers, like you can be like fully working and then out of work in a hurry.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't foresee it replacing jobs that quickly. I mean, the creative side of it has taken a bit of time to fully get to a point where even we like it, right? There are certain problems it has, which, I mean, you've probably seen the videos, right? Of like, they put like a photo of like The Rock, right? Dwayne The Rock Johnson, right? They just slap him up and they say, copy this photo exactly as it is right now. And they do it 100 times. And then he just kind of like mushes down into this weird potato, like, amalgamation of his once former self. And you're like, okay, so AI still is really not good at going, copy to copy generation. So it has a problem there for like, so for a brand like ours, where we've got a strong orange fox mascot that has a very specific face and smile. The moment you try to say replicate this and it starts to get mushy, then it turns into a different fox. And then it's suddenly not even a fox. It's like some weird furry looking thing that's just like, that's kind of hyper realistic now. Let's go back to, flat illustrative minimalist design. Even when you have the words to describe the art from a very clear kind of like directional and stylistic standpoint, it fails miserably, right? So, I mean, that I think creatives will at least be safe for a short duration. I've definitely, I've thought about that a lot because, I mean, when we select for hiring creatives, you do have to sit down and look at portfolios for portfolio's sake, right? And really go back to, again, we're hiring for skills. So it always comes back to skills. What are the skills that you actually have? And then how are you using AI in your work? And you tend to find here is that they're still the originators of the source content that AI feeds off of. Mm-hmm. Right. And as much as it's good at taking the 170,000 words in the English language and figuring out the parameters for the next best guess for a theoretical concept, it still has trouble generating something completely novel and original that would come from the true academics of society or the true creatives of society. So I don't know. I am excited to see this kind of call to arms for poets and scientists again, because I feel like we're about to enter a new Renaissance era also, where the people that push back are going to be the true creatives that drive society forward again.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. But it's all the word. The key word is adaptation.
Yeah.
How are you
adapting to it? You're right. Yeah. Okay. What I am interested in, though, going back to what we were originally going to talk about was HR, right? But how are you guys actually using AI in your document workflows today, right? Because we're a document company. Obviously, we sell a lot of APIs and SDKs to companies that need to ingest resume viewers into their platforms and their software. How is AI actually being used in your workflows today? Are you using it to parse resumes quicker? Are you plugging into like OpenAI directly, or are you using again AI as a point solution kind of in your technology?
The best answer is all the above.
Okay.
So like what you're seeing and with kind of the out of the box solutions is they'll give you a point value for each applicant, right? But I'll give you, so like I'm using LinkedIn's own data here. In January, February of this year, the average number of submissions per job opening was about 100 to 110. The data as of last month has actually gone up to 250.
Yeah, so it doubled because of, I assume, AI automation or automated app. Yeah,
it doubled for probably a lot of reasons. But now think about if you're a human recruiter, you're likely having to interview between 4 to 6 candidates. So you've got to parse 250. So what you're probably going to do is go into the system to say, okay, how many people are at 95% match, and then see what that number is. Is it 100? Is it 10? Mm-hmm. Right? So you'll play with that scale a little bit.
Yeah.
But sometimes it might be like 99%.
Yeah.
Right. So that's, if you're not even delving into, the 99%, that's a problem. It's also creating for a horrible experience for applicants. So what you've also seen is within the span of just this year, about 10% of applicants that were submitting to a particular open job were getting some type of response from whatever hiring company. Yep. It's now less than 4%.
Wow, because the volume is so high that they can't even just take the time to
shoot
to let them know. Yeah,
thank you so much or whatever, or they're just left in lingo. And of course, at the end of the day, it's still one job offer. So there is so much to be desired in terms of improvement as it relates to how you can create that experience better, right? And what's interesting is, and this is a Harvard Business Review case study under the old CEO at Starbucks. They realized that people that were applying for jobs at Starbucks were also big time Starbucks customers.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And people stopped going to Starbucks. Well, this was one of the reasons why, because they were having a horrible experience getting hired. They were submitting their resume, whatever. He made it a point to say, we need to really pull in people better, functionally, technically, and even the HR department, so that everyone gets some type of response. So even if they're not going to be a barista or working at Starbucks, it's a positive experience.
Yeah,
and he did,
because there were still customers at the end of the day that could impact everyone. Yeah, was this during the Howard Schultz era, or was this during
Howard Schultz era?
Yeah, great book. If you ever read his whole book about it. I love how I think it was like there he broke down or stopped all of the Starbucks one day, did the first thing of his kind where he just shut everything down all across the United States to go retrain everyone how to pull the perfect shot of espresso because of their commitment to the customer experience. And he realized that it's just they weren't learning what they needed to foundationally, so he just said, nope, we're just going to pause everything for revenue and have a full day of training. And I don't care about the money losses. I want to make sure that the experience is good. But he was always about that. He was a great CEO.
And so, but things are going so fast and these tools are coming online. But I'll give you another interesting. So this is an example of the entropy you're seeing with AI within HR. So one of the things that I just pulled it up here, where are companies getting their hires, right? You have seen it go from about 15% employee referrals. So if you post a job, you get a bunch of applicants, everything else. That number's up to 40%.
Wow.
So What's hysterical though is, so you open the job, you want to take a look at all these people coming through, and essentially you have people circumventing the system.
Yeah.
So
it's at least 40% of them.
Yeah, and so you're kind of going like, oh, we've got to do a better job rolling these systems out for better successful outcomes. It doesn't matter that you're Jesse the Body Ventura with a Gatling gun laying waste Predator style, like getting as many resumes out the door as possible. You would probably be better off submitting to 2 to 3 jobs in a day, but really doing a good job and even looking into the hiring managers.
Yeah. I mean, from personal experience, I mean, I don't know. That's how I've got all my jobs. I mean, like, while I may have or hit a 10-a-day target, it's the 3 or 4 that I put the most commitment into writing the cover letter, providing a very specific portfolio of attachments. And I always say in my cover letter, I'm like, I really hope you read my portfolio and read these projects I was a part of. And that's just what I've been doing for a long time, because it shows that you took the time to document your successes and you have something to celebrate and share. And a lot of people forget that it's like, that is what people ultimately are looking for, the skills, but also your ability to work on a team and know your role. Because I don't need somebody that necessarily led the team every single time. Sometimes my role was just lateral, but being able to understand your context and tell that story, the written form sometimes is better, because you may botch it on an interview question because you can't think off the top of your head sometime when a challenge hit and blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, tell me a different story. It was also challenging that I may view as a challenge that you overcame. But yeah, I don't know. For any applicants that are listening to this, I encourage you, submit a full set. Put whatever you think shows the best version of you, because I'm happy to look at it.
Well, but Evan, you bring up something that is actually another good point. What is common knowledge to you and to me through experiences and everything else? It doesn't matter if I'm talking to high school grad or bachelor grads or masters or even PhD students. It's not common knowledge.
Yeah, it's not.
To the general public. So like the more I tell them, like, this is really how you get a job. It's somewhat disingenuous because they're like, but in LinkedIn, I just do easy apply.
And you're like, anybody that does that, it literally shows to me that you just clicked easy apply, and then it gives what do you think it tells people, when you just click the button? Like, what do you think? And throw the question back, and you'd be surprised, but they don't think that it comes across as, oh, I just took the easy approach and applied at scale. I thought I was gaming the system. It's like, no, that's not what people want to see. They want to see that you're genuinely interested. Yeah, you have either some connection to this business, or you at least took the time to reach out to somebody. I mean, I love it when someone tries to reach out to someone else on the team and it gets them to actually commit to hopping on a phone call for 15 minutes just to learn about either me or what the job is. And a lot of them do it. And a lot of our team members will actually go take the time to give them the knowledge and say, good luck. I hope that this helps you. But again, it's a different way that hasn't become commonplace. So I don't know. It's also, I feel like
you're looking at a lot of applicants would just be so happy just to be able to click the easy button and walk away, but so would 500.
Well, and most hiring
people.
managers don't give feedback either, so they don't give feedback to actually improve. And you either get people that are just kind of coaching on LinkedIn, trying to sell their resume services, and sometimes they do actually do a good job. But for the most part, like, there's not direct feedback on why you didn't get the job or you did. And it's for whatever, for legal reasons or something else. But in many cases, it just comes down to you click the button and you didn't provide any additional information. So the people that did rose to the top in the system, and whether that's a bias or not, I don't know. It's like
I
fed an algorithm. I know that.
I will tell you, maybe this is kind of one of my final thoughts on this topic, which is, universities are starting to see that generation that was essentially locked inside for COVID.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you're seeing is, and again, there's some other studies to kind of corroborate this, you're not seeing the same level of social skills.
Yep.
So this is a generation that is used to communicating via a text or whatever, as opposed to, like you just talked about, like getting on the phone and having to face-to-face or whatever. You have a generation that doesn't have those skills. So they see an easy apply button, and to them it's logical to say easy apply. Not realize that the hiring managers, which are typically people plus or minus the age on this call, they're like, because you're like, why would I respond? But again, if you don't have those kind of unique skill sets to find a job, you can see how this becomes really daunting. So,
well, we want the best candidates. So the burden is on us to help at least educate there. I will, definitely agree with you on that point.
All right. Evan, thanks so much for joining. Daniel, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it. We're going to have all of your links down in the description below, so please click on those, learn more.
Yeah, this is enjoyable. Thanks, guys.
Gentlemen,
Great meeting you,
have a
Daniel.
great one. Thank you.